And we've got special coverage here on SNY. Gary Apple inside our New York City studios alongside our SNY MLB insider. It's Andy Martino as the Mets are getting set to introduce Carlos Mendoza as the 25th manager in the history of the organization. He takes over for Buck Showalter, who was in the hot seat for the last couple of seasons. So let's begin before we send it out to the ballpark. And by the way, Todd Zeal and Jerry Blevins going to join us in just a little bit. But I'll begin with you on this, Andy. What are the Mets getting here in Carlos Mendoza?
This is a universally acclaimed hire in the industry, Gary. This is a guy with a high ceiling, but don't ask me. Ask the guy who he's been working for the last couple of years, Aaron Boone, which I did last week. Boone said a lot about Mendoza. He loves him, but here he says he's a complete package. He's open-minded. He's in tune with everything in the game, meaning nutrients, analytics, dealing with players. He's not afraid to debate, talk, very important. He has the ability to push back on anything, but he knows he doesn't know everything. So what we're describing there and what Boone is describing there is a guy who the Yankees really didn't want to lose because he knows how to talk to a front office about ideas that might not be great. And I think, speaking of ideas, we're going to hear from Mendy himself right now.
All right, let's go out to the ballpark. The introduction of Carlos Mendoza. We send it to Citi Field.
Mets.com. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to David Stearns.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I want to particularly welcome Carlos's family, wife Frances, Adrian Andres, sons, parents, all the way here from Venezuela. We're thrilled that you all can be here today. Welcome to the Mets. Throughout this process, we prioritized finding a manager who could not only impact and lead our team in the dugout, but who could help us shape an environment throughout our entire organization as well. And I firmly believe that Carlos has the ability to do that. Carlos's upbeat, positive personality, his genuine care for people, his baseball knowledge, his experience in this city, his sincerity, all shown throughout our process, throughout our time getting to know each other, and make him the right person for this job. You know, we've talked about before, I've talked about before how big these jobs are. We ask our manager to communicate with a wide swath of people, from the clubhouse through the front office, with all of you, to ownership. Carlos has those communication skills. He has the leadership ability, and I'm thrilled that I get to partner with him here now with the Mets. We're excited to have you on board, and with that, it's my privilege to announce Carlos Mendoza as the next manager of the New York Mets. Congratulations.
Hoping this goes smooth for you.
You got it. It's the first test.
It feels great, though. Thanks, David.
Congratulations.
Take some pictures. Right into it.
Carlos?
Man, this feels good. It feels great. This is a great day. This is a special day for me, my family, and the Mets organization. For me, it's an honor and a privilege to be wearing this uniform. And I would like to thank Steve and Alex for giving me this great opportunity, for believing in my abilities to lead this ball club. Thank you. I'd like to thank David and the baseball operation people. You guys put me to work. It wasn't easy, but I'm excited to partner with you and the organization, and looking forward for great things here to come. I would like to thank my parents. My mom, happy birthday. Today's my mom's birthday, and this is incredible. I remember like it was yesterday, but almost 30 years ago when we sat down at home and we were trying to make a decision whether I was going to be a baseball player and pursue my dream to become a big league player or become an engineer like my dad. And I was pretty firm, and I remember when I said I want to be a big league player. Well, I didn't become a big league player, but today I'm the manager of the New York Mets. So for that, thank you so much. To my dad, and I want to make sure I say this in Spanish so he can understand here. Para mi papá, ha sido el mejor coach, el mejor mentor que he tenido en mi vida. Gracias por enseñarme los principios y valores de la vida. El respeto, la humildad, el sacrificio y el trabajo fuerte. Para mí es un honor y de verdad, papá, que siempre has sido y siempre lo serás mi mejor coach. Gracias. To my wife, Francis, thank you for not only being my best friend, you always been there for me through the good, the not so good times, supporting us, raising our kids. You gave up everything in life. You gave up. I remember having this conversation with you. Are you sure you want to do this? You gave up your career as a dentist back in Venezuela, your mom, your sister, and all the people that you love. And you say, I'm ready to do this with you. And here we are, Francis. I love you so much, and I can't wait for this new chapter in our life. To my boys, Adrian and Andres, thank you for being there, for understanding that Dad is away from home for a long time. And one thing I'm going to tell you is now you're coming home. You're coming to New York. The other question you asked when David called me and gave me the news was, Dad, are we going to be able to come to the field and practice with you now that you are the manager? The answer to that is yes, you're coming with me, and we're going to get to spend some time and practice as well. So thank you so much. I'd like to thank the San Francisco Giants organization for giving me the first opportunity to become a baseball player back in 1996. I would like to thank the New York Yankees for giving me the opportunity to become a coach and to develop as a coach and eventually as a big league coach here in New York. There's a lot of people that I want to acknowledge here, but we could be here for a long, long time, you know. But there's one guy that I want to mention because I remember when I was finishing my playing career, and he approached me and asked me if I wanted to become a coach. And, you know, I thought about it. Then we decided, you know, with my family to pursue that career. And when I got done managing my first year, he called me in the office and said, Carlos, you're gonna be a manager in the big leagues. And here I am. I know you're proud. Mark Newman. Thank you so much. I also like to thank my sister back in Venezuela, Lorena. Thank you for the support. I'm getting emotional here. And I want to say something in Spanish too, to my country and to the Latin community. Para mí es un honor y un privilegio estar aquí sentado en estos momentos y representar a mi país, a Venezuela y a toda la comunidad latina, mediante esta plataforma de ser manager en Grandes Ligas de los Mets de Nueva York. Mi consejo siempre es que nunca se rindan cuando ustedes están buscando sus metas, cuando ustedes pasan por momentos difíciles. Si Carlos Mendoza lo pudo lograr, y las personas que me conocen saben muy bien lo mucho que yo trabajé, lo que sufrí, cuando me caí y tuve que levantarme, con todo el apoyo de mi familia. Y ese es el mensaje que le tengo a todos los latinos, que sus sueños siempre los puedes lograr con respeto, con dedicación, cuando trabajas fuerte. Y aquí estoy, pues representándolos a todos ustedes. Les doy todas las gracias, de verdad que sí. Y a los fanáticos de los Mets de Nueva York, Para mí es un honor y un orgullo, un placer tener puesto este uniforme. Espero pues aportar a esa cultura que se ha venido construyendo. Entiendo que son unos fanáticos muy exigentes y estoy completamente preparado para esa gran oportunidad y traer campeonatos a la ciudad de Queens. All right, so when I first started that process, and David first called me, and the more we got deep into conversation and with his baseball people, and we started to get to know each other really well, you know. The way they were asking me questions, I was asking them a lot of questions. They were not only interviewing me, but I was also interviewing them because I wanted to know what they were all about. And when they started talking about culture, people, relationships, preparation, that I felt a connection right away because that's who I am. I care a lot about people, relationship, respect, and the ability to put a product, you know, there's going to be able to compete for championships. I understand that people are saying this is a big challenge, you know, especially for a guy that never managed at the big league level. I understand the city of New York. I've been here for the past 6 years, and I know how passionate the fan base is and the expectations that they got here. Just know that I understand, and I am ready for this challenge. I see this as a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for not only Carlos Mendoza, but for the New York Mets. Man, this is great. The one thing that I'm coming in here, I'm not just creating a new culture. People need to understand that this is a team that won 100 games not too long ago. And they started to create something special. And I'm coming in to continue to add to that culture, you know, to continue to add to those positive things that we're already building a couple of years ago. And when we start talking about culture, I do believe that culture is not just your tradition. Culture is driven by the people that you come in contact with every day. And that starts from ownership, from David as the president of baseball operation and his people, myself as the manager, that eventually is going to go and trickle down through the coaching staff, players, and everybody in the organization through player development all the way to the Dominican Republic. Culture is driven by us, by the way we connect, by the way we think, by the way we value our culture, by the way we communicate each and every day. And that's my goal. That's my goal, to continue to drive that culture. I came up in the area, you know, back in 1996 when I was taught to play the game with fundamentals, to respect the game, to pay attention to details. That's how I came up as a player. But I also, when I came up as a coach, all the information that, you know, came available, I was able to learn that side of the game. And I'm planning on using that. There's a balance, right? And I'm planning on using both of them. At the end of the day, it's about connecting, it's about building relationships, and it's about winning championships. And I'm hoping that we get that opportunity here with David and the whole organization. I'm going to surround myself with people that are going to bring energy. They're going to earn the respect from players and from everyone in the building. That people that are going to be honest, that are going to hold people accountable. And we're going to be able to hold each other accountable. But at the same time, we're going to have fun. This is a hard game. This is a hard game. And that is played by human beings. And at the end of the day, we got to have fun. And I'm really looking forward to it. And the last thing I'm going to say is I want to say thank you to all of you that are here in the audience. And I'm really looking forward to building that professional working relationship. Because I know how much you guys care. I know you guys have a job to do, talking to the media members. And I'm hoping that we can develop that relationship here starting today. I know how much you know about the game of baseball, and trust me, when managing in winter ball, when you got millions of managers and the fan base will let you know as soon as you walk out of that ballpark because you left a pitcher too long, or because you took him too early, or because you didn't pitch. I know what it feels like. I know what it takes. So, and I know how much you guys know about baseball, and I can't wait to meet and have deep conversations with Gary, Keith, and Ron. Again, with that, man, I'm super excited. It is a privilege. It is an honor for me to be wearing this uniform, and I can't wait to get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. At this point, we'll take questions from the audience. Please state your name and affiliation. We'll start with Steve Gelbs from SNY.
Hey, guys. Yep. Steve Gelbs, SNY. Carlos, congratulations. You know, you spoke about the culture that you hope to build or continue to build upon. In terms of on-field product, though, how would you describe what a Carlos Mendoza managed team looks like on a day-in, day-out basis? Yeah,
it starts with connection, relationship, so the players can trust me and, know where, that I'm there for them and want to have their back, right? But it comes down to preparation, attention to details each and every day, and competing. I want the team to go out there and play hard every pitch. I want them to, and then at the end of the day, I want them to have fun. But I'm a huge and a big believer. I've learned through my experience that the connections, the trust, the respect, the relationships in the locker room, in the clubhouse, when you care about people, when you connect, it creates that culture that we're talking about that eventually will show up on the baseball field. But guys are going to be prepared, and just know that we understand the expectations here in New York.
And David, for you, I know that the two of you didn't know each other prior to this process. So what was the initial process, I guess, for you to figure out the list of people you wanted to interview? What did you hear about Carlos? And then ultimately, when you did get to meet him, what pushed him across the finish line?
Yeah, so as we went through this, there were a couple different stages. And the first stage was sort of that standard due diligence stage, reference checks, calling around, trying to get to know as much about our candidate pool as we possibly could. And when you get through that stage, you have a pretty good feel for who each candidate is, what their backgrounds are, what people have to say about them. Then for me, the next stage was really ensuring that I felt a connection to the person who was going to be our next manager. We've talked about the partnership that these types of jobs require. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. We're going to be on the phone a lot together. We're going to be dealing with some real highs, and at times we're probably going to be dealing with some lows together as well. And we're going to have the relationship, the bond, and the trust to collectively work through that. And I think the more time Carlos and I spent together, the more we both felt comfortable that we have the ability to do that together.
In the center.
Saludos, Carlos. Natalie, lasmayores.com. Felicidades. Hablaste hace un momento de tu experiencia en el béisbol invernal. Obviamente son ligas muy distintas, pero la meta es la misma, ganar, a diferencia de ligas menores. ¿Qué tú sacaste de esos 2 años con los Cardenales de Lara que tú sientes te va a ayudar en este nuevo rol aquí en Grandes Ligas?
Sí, gracias Natalie por tu pregunta. Mira, una gran experiencia. Yo siempre he dicho que no solamente como pelotero, sino como coach o como manager, esa es la mejor escuela que tú puedes tener. Es como que la universidad. Y mi experiencia en los últimos 2 años con el equipo Cardenales de Lara, pues me ayudó a eso, a manejar las expectativas, a manejar un clubhouse, a manejar pues todas las personalidades que tú tienes contactos en el día a día, pero más que todo pues la importancia de ganar todos los días y ganar últimamente un campeonato. Lamentablemente pues no se consiguió en esos 2 años con la gente de Cardenales, que es un equipo que para mí pues el equipo de la infancia. pero el mayor aprendizaje fue eso, manejar las expectativas, cómo manejar con el personal, con los peloteros, y al final del día pues tener esa relación con todos ellos. Una bonita experiencia y yo creo que fue algo impactante en mi carrera.
On the right.
Yes, Bill Atson, MLB.com. For Carlos, after talking to the front office, what do you think of your current roster and what needs fixing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm excited about our roster. Like I said earlier, this is a team that won 100 games not too long ago, and a lot of the core players are still on our roster, right? So I do feel really good about that. Yeah, we got some work to do, and I trust David and his team to continue to make improvement and to continue to add. But I am very excited with the group of players that we currently have on our roster.
All right, my second question is, have you talked to Ozzie Guillen? He was the first person from Venezuela to manage a big league club. I'm just wondering, what advice has he given you?
Yeah, I know Ozzie because when he was retiring, I was at the beginning of my playing career, so we played together. He texted me right away, just wishing me good luck and just be myself. But yeah, I know Ozzie well, and I have a lot of respect, obviously, as our first manager to win a World Series from Venezuela, so a lot of respect for him.
Bruce on the left.
Carlos, Bruce Beck, NBC4 New York. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bruce.
You sound optimistic, you sound enthusiastic, but what are your concerns? What are your challenges?
That's a good question, Bruce. I don't know about if I call it concern or, like I said, challenge. I'm just excited to get the opportunity to be here in New York, Like I say, I've been here for 6 years. My family loved the city. I love, the city of New York. And I understand how passionate the fan base is. They want to win. And they have high expectations. And when you're not meeting those expectations, they're going to let you know. But they're also going to support you when you're playing well. I experienced playoff games here in October on the other side of town, and I can't wait to bring that and to have that experience here in Citi Field with the Mets fans.
Tim
Healy from Newsday. David has used the words collaborate and partnership a lot throughout this process. What do those words and that dynamic mean from your perspective?
Yeah, team. This is something that I've learned early on in my career when I came up with the Yankees as a coach. That using all the resources, asking people's opinion, having that ability to have a sit down and have that tough conversation and challenge people. And I think when we talk about a partnership here that David talks about is trusting each other. Knowing that we're going to have each other's back, good or bad. And then we're going to have conversations that are going to be tough, but at the end of the day, because of the trust and the respect that we have for each other, we're going to move on and accomplish great things.
On the left.
Carlos, first off, congratulations on the job. Mark Malusis, Pix 11 Sports. I want to ask you, when you were interviewing David, as David was interviewing you, besides culture, what were some of the other concerns that you had that were rectified or answered that presented you and looked at this opportunity as being the great one that it is?
Yeah, like I said, I don't think I saw it as a concern. It was just more like his vision, expectations, because I want to win, just like everyone else, right? And he wants to win, So it was just more of those topics, wanted to know where they were at in the vision, short term, long term, and those were some of the conversations that went on.
Short term vision, you expect to be a winning team in 2024?
We expect to compete. We expect to compete in 2024. Like I say, we like our team. There's some talented players coming back from a team that won 100 games not too long ago, and we are excited about the group of position players that we got in the upper level. So yeah, I am excited.
Will?
Hey, Carlos. Will Salmon from The Athletic. David has mentioned you knowing what it takes to win in New York and to lead in New York. I know you mentioned expectations. What does leadership look like in New York? What does it require from you?
Yeah, it requires There's a lot, obviously, especially here in New York, because there's high expectations, and the fans are going to let you know. They expect to win, they expect championships, and they're going to let you know when you're not meeting those expectations. But I go back to relationships, building that culture in that clubhouse where players and people that you work with can trust you. I believe that this is a huge part of the job, and that you're going to go through ups and downs. And I'm ready for this challenge. I'm ready for this new chapter, and I can't wait to get going.
In the back.
Angie Hernández en New York One, en español para ti, Carlos. Felicidades.
Gracias.
Quiero saber cuáles serán tus estrategias viniendo ya al 2024 para los Mets.
Mira, estrategia como tal, pues podemos hablar mucho. Primero tenemos que empezar a armar el roster. Obviamente, como lo he dicho, muy contento por las piezas que tenemos. Un equipo que esperamos que va a ser competitivo. Es un equipo que tiene piezas que ganaron 100 juegos no hace mucho tiempo atrás. Y mira, todo dependiendo del roster que uno tenga para hablar de estrategias. Pero es agresividad, es preparación, es comunicación. Es que de verdad que nos podamos respetar y que podamos disfrutar del juego de béisbol al final del día.
On the right.
Carlos, Ron Blum from AP. When, what day, and what were the circumstances when David and the Mets called and told you you were going to get the job? Were you sitting at home? Was it a phone or a Zoom? Yeah. And then, David, what was it, and when did you decide he was the one?
My boys and my wife are smiling right now because it was pretty stressful, I was, flying across country and meeting with, people. And I remember it was a Sunday, and the whole day I was pretty tired that day. And my youngest one, Andres, came up to me, I don't know, probably like at 6:30, and he was like, "Dad, I'm bored. I wanna go out and play catch. I wanna do some picks." He's a pretty good infielder, right? And sure enough, I went out there, started throwing picks and doing some glove work and all that. And before I know it, my phone rang. It was David. And I was like, "All right, we got action here." So I came back in, and I sat down in front of my wife, and I received the news, and I could hear my wife crying and my boys jumping already, and so yeah, it was pretty exciting.
Dave, what was the thing that made you decide he's the one?
These are evolving processes, right? And so we do our best not only to get to know the candidates and the people as we're meeting them, but also try to learn about them as much as we can. And really, the more I learned and we learned about Carlos, it felt like a great fit. And then after we spent some time together, and it was clear to me that we were going to have the ability, I think on both ends, to build the type of relationship, spend the type of time together that we're going to need to spend together. That's when I think I realized that this could be a really good match, and I became really excited about it.
In the middle.
Daniel Reyes, Grandes en los Deportes, CDN Deportes. Carlos, felicidades.
Gracias, Daniel.
Como venezolano y latino, ¿cómo te sientes de finalmente ser manager de MLB?
Orgulloso, de verdad que sí. Para mí es un honor y un privilegio pues estar aquí sentado y con este uniforme, siendo el manager de los Mets de Nueva York. Como lo dije en el statement inicial, pues no es nada fácil para nosotros los latinos de llegar y estar ganarse una posición de esto, porque al final del día tú te la ganas con el trabajo, con el respeto, la dedicación. Y ese es el mensaje pues que yo le doy a toda esa gente, pues no solamente en el béisbol, sino en la vida como tal, de que no es nada fácil y que hay que luchar por conseguir tu sueño, y que cuando tú te caigas pues hay que levantarse. Y bueno, de verdad muy agradecido, dándole las gracias a Dios por darme esta oportunidad mediante esta plataforma del béisbol de las Grandes Ligas, donde yo puedo impactar y ser ejemplo para esas generaciones, pues no solamente en Venezuela sino en toda Latinoamérica.
On the right.
Hi, Carlos. Laura Albanese from Newsday. You had talked about surrounding yourself with people that can build the culture here. When it comes to coaching staff decisions, what in particular are you looking for, either with the people that you decide to retain or the ones that you look to bring on?
Yeah, we're in the process of putting together that coaching staff. We spoke with some of them, talking to David. But, yeah, we're talking about building a culture, right? So you're looking for people that, are going to bring energy. They are going to earn their respect from players. They are going to be consistent. They are going to be prepared. That have leadership skills. They are going to be able to communicate. They are going to be able to have that tough conversation. They're going to be able to hold people accountable, right? And that's what we're looking for. So, yeah, we're in the process of it, and it's a big puzzle that we have to put together here. But I'm excited to continue to have those conversations with David and the whole baseball operation people.
I guess as a follow-up, do you anticipate significant turnover, and are you specifically looking for somebody who has maybe a little bit more experience since you are a first-year manager?
Like I said, we're looking at everything. What I could say is that Jeremy Hefner is coming back as a pitching coach, and I think David already mentioned that a few days ago. And we're in the process of having those conversations, and looking for those qualities that I just mentioned.
On the left.
Felicidades, Carlos. Manny Gomez, New Jersey Advanced Media. Two questions. The first one is, did you have a conversation with Luis Rojas before accepting this position, and what advice did he give you? And the second is, number 28, what does that number represent to you?
Yeah, I consider Luis as a friend. We go back to our years in the minor leagues, managing against each other and competing against each other. And when David first reached out, I gave him a call, and it's like, because he knew more of the people that that I've known. So I asked for some advice, and like just kind of give me a lay on the line of some of the people that I was gonna go talk to. But yeah, I consider him as a friend, and I wish him nothing but the best of luck. I know he's gonna be next pretty soon here. And the 28, this is a big number for me. And it's when I first started playing winter ball with Tiburones de la Guaira, they gave me this number, and I won the Rookie of the Year that year. And fans started buying that jersey. So that and it's also a special family date, because that's when I first met my wife at the time. It was on September 28th. So 28 has been a huge number. So when they presented to me with some of the options, and I saw 28, it was a no-brainer for me.
On the right.
Hi, Carlos. Abby Mastracco from the New York Daily News. You've mentioned dealing with the media a couple times now. What have you maybe learned from Aaron or from Luis Rojas about some of the more challenging aspects of being a manager, like dealing with the media that you didn't have to deal with as a coach previously? Yeah, just as simple as understanding that's part of the job, a huge part of the job, that you guys got a job to do, and I have had a job to do, and that's why I was saying, referring towards having that relationship, that working professional relationship, because you guys are here for a reason, right? And I'm kind of like the bridge of communicating with through you to the fan base. So I think it's important, and those are some of the things that I'm really looking forward to as a manager now.
In front.
Agustín Zapata, N1C Sport News. Carlos, felicitaciones por la designación como manager del equipo de los Mets de New York. Aceptar el reto de dirigir este equipo, ¿cómo tú lo defines? Otra pregunta, y ser el segundo venezolano apenas en dirigir un equipo de béisbol en la Grande Liga, ¿qué significa para ti?
Sí, mira, primero que nada, asumo este reto con mucha humildad, con gran profesionalismo y de verdad con muchas ganas, pues, de conseguir grandes cosas aquí con los Mets de Nueva York. Es un equipo, pues, que, como lo he dicho varias veces, ganó 100 juegos hace par de años, y la mayoría del grupo, pues, que perteneció a ese equipo todavía está en el roster de nosotros, un grupo muy talentoso. Y de verdad que estoy ansioso para empezar, pues, a construir esa cultura que nos va a ayudar a ganar juegos de béisbol. La segunda pregunta... orgulloso, de verdad que sí, orgulloso de ser el segundo venezolano oficialmente, pues obviamente Alfredo Pedrique, a quien considero uno de mis grandes mentores, y Miguel Cairo, pues que tuvo la oportunidad, pero Osvaldo Guillén fue el primero y ganó la Serie Mundial. Son personas que admiro muchísimo, que considero amigos, y mira, para mí es un honor, un orgullo y un privilegio, pues, representar a Venezuela, mediante esta plataforma, la del béisbol de Grandes Ligas, sabiendo lo mucho que se goza y que se vive el béisbol allá. Para mí es un honor y un gran privilegio.
On the right.
Thank you. Carlos, felicidades. Daniel Álvarez del Extra Base en Venezuela. Carlos, desde que tenías el puesto de bench coach en Nueva York con los Yankees. Creo que tuviste cantidades de entrevistas con distintos equipos y no se dio sino hasta ahora. De esas experiencias, ¿qué fue lo que más fuiste sacando que te ayudó a esta finalmente con los Mets? Y que me hables también de la satisfacción de que por fin se te dio lo que tanto estabas buscando.
Sí, gracias Daniel, y agradecido de que estés aquí. Significa mucho para mí y para la familia. Sí, mira, a veces pueden ser un poco frustrantes cuando tú vas a todos esos procesos pues, y no recibes la noticia que estás buscando, pero a la vez aprendes mucho de esos procesos, porque como lo dije, como enfrenté el proceso con los Mets, así como te están entrevistando a ti, uno tiene que entrevistarlos a ellos para ver si es la situación que de verdad machea, como quien dice. Y eso fue una de las grandes experiencias, fue mucho aprendizaje y que me ayudó pues para prepararme para eventualmente recibir esta oportunidad que gracias a Dios en el día de hoy los Mets de Nueva York me las están dando.
Again on the right.
Jake Mintz, FoxSports.com. I'm curious, who are some other managers around the baseball world, either that you've played for, that you've been around, or you've seen from afar, whose style you think you might emulate?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and I don't think it comes with surprise, is Rob Thompson. You know, I consider him one of my mentors because of the years with the Yankees and now what he's doing with the Phillies. But Dusty Baker, you know, even though I never got a chance to work with him, when I was a young player coming up with the Giants, I went to big league camp for 3 years. And I learned a lot from him. And you know, we developed a really good relationship, you know, when he took over for the Houston Astros, and we had a lot of conversations, and one of the first people that reached out to me was Dusty. You know, we got over the phone, and we talked, and he gave me a lot of advice, but this is another guy that made a huge impact on my career just by the way he handled from spring training. The way he set up expectations from day one was very impactful for me. I also been I learned a lot through the past few years from Willie Randolph, who I consider a friend. This is a guy that had I don't know that he knows it, but he had a big impact on my coaching career. And he was the other one that I reached out to. I had an opportunity to play for Luis Aparicio back in Winter Ball, our only Hall of Famer from Venezuela. And this is another funny story because we used to live in the same apartment complex. So I used to get on the elevator when I was like 5, 6 years old, and that was Luis Aparicio. And my mom used to tell me, you know, that's Luis Aparicio. And I was like, who's Luis Aparicio? And it's like, you know, when I started getting older, and then I got the opportunity to play for him. He was a huge impact on my career as well. And I can name a lot of people here that made a huge impact on me. I'm not going to forget about Pat McMahon because this is another guy that had you know, I consider him my second dad. And I know you're listening. I know you're proud of me, Pat. And I can go on and on and on. But yeah, those are some of the people that I'm sharing with you guys.
We're going to do a couple more in the center here.
César Márquez, de la Liga Venezolana de Béisbol Profesional. Carlos, felicidades. 2 preguntas. Tuviste la oportunidad de trabajar con Eduardo Brizuela durante el Clásico Mundial. ¿Qué tanto ayuda a la comunicación con la gerencia trabajar con él nuevamente ahora con los Mets? Y en segundo lugar, de todos los managers que has tenido en tu carrera y técnicos, ¿cuál crees tú que ha sido el que más ha influido en tu estilo de dirigir?
Sí, mira, Eduardo, para mí es un honor y un placer de tener la oportunidad de trabajar juntos, especialmente aquí en este nuevo capítulo que estamos los dos empezando a escribir. Tuve la oportunidad de trabajar con Eduardo en el Clásico Mundial, ya que él fue el gerente general y mira, qué gran ser humano, de verdad que sí. Para mí que eso es sumamente importante. Sin mencionar pues lo preparado, lo inteligente y de la manera como se comunica. Para mí es más que todo pues la clase de ser humano. De verdad que para mí es un placer. No sabía pues porque él no fue parte de este proceso. Cuando yo estaba en el proceso pues él todavía no pertenecía a la organización y pues qué sorpresa para mí que una vez pues entero que Eduardo pues voy a estar trabajando con él y para mí de verdad que orgulloso de él también. Y la segunda pregunta, un manager que haya sido, mira, tuve muchos managers, como te digo, hablo de un Luis Aparicio, hablo de Shane Turner, fue un manager mío con ligas menores. Fue bastante duro conmigo, pero me enseñó a jugar béisbol, los fundamentos. En invierno pues tuve manager como Luis Ojo. Y mira, de verdad yo creo que mucha gente ha impactado en la carrera de Carlos Mendoza, que yo como lo he dicho varias veces, podemos pasar aquí todo el día y yo mencionar a gente que me ha ayudado y de la que he aprendido. De verdad que orgullosos de todo porque todos tuvieron un granito de arena para yo poder estar aquí.
And last question in the center.
Mark Roseman from KindnessCorner.com. It's a two-part question for both of you. So, David, obviously in this world of analytics, there's no real analytics for a baseball manager. But if you look at trends, last 30 managers in the World Series, none of them were first-time managers with either no experience as a manager, no experience as a player, or no experience within the organization. When you look at that, what makes Carlos the right guy to end that trend? And Carlos, same thing. What makes you the guy that will be the first in 30 years to win a World Series as a first-time manager?
So I think, first of all, I think there have been, in fact, there are a lot of really good managers right now, managing in baseball right now, that were first-time managers when they first were hired, right? So, yeah, I do think there are a lot of first-time managers out there who have proven that you can do this job in big markets, you can do it successfully. Look, Mendy has a really unique skill set, and it's not only his experience in the game, but who he is as a person, his ability to connect with people of a variety of different backgrounds at different levels in the organization. And you combine that with his robust experience within the game, his knowledge of the game, and the time he spent in this town. And I certainly have confidence that he's the right person.
Yeah, and I understand that's a question and that's a topic now, but I've been preparing for this since I started coaching, and every step along the way, and especially my last 6 years here in New York, I know it's real, and I know the expectations from the fan base, but it's one of those where I can't wait to get started. I know I'm ready. I know I'm prepared, and I know how much the fans wants to win, and that's what we're here for.
Thank you very much and congratulations. Before we do a photo op, I'm just going to a couple of instructions. We'd ask the beat reporters to go over here and the local TV stations over there. And at this point, we're going to do a photo op on the stage.
So Carlos Mendoza, the 25th manager in the history of the New York Mets, being introduced by David Stearns, the new baseball president of baseball operations with the Mets. Andy Martino sitting alongside inside the studio with me here. What was your biggest takeaway from what you heard, Andy?
His confidence, his presence. You could see that he commanded the room even from the distance. They're in Queens, we're in Manhattan right now, but we could still tell that he commanded the room.
Very much so, yes.
And I liked the way he expressed his confidence, and the people I was texting with that are watching this in the industry also liked that he expressed his confidence in a way that wasn't certainly arrogant or cocky or anything like that, but it was, the Mets interviewed me, but I interviewed the Mets.
Yes.
He knows that he's going to be a good manager for somebody at some point, so are the Mets going to be the fit for him? He knows that, and there's a way to be smug about saying something like that, and he couldn't have been the farthest thing from that. He was just like that internal sense of, I am a good candidate, I am a good manager, and that's the confidence that you need to work with and even push back on star players, front office people who are intelligent and experienced and confident themselves. So what he's bringing is that cool, easy confidence that certainly the Yankees, their players, their staff, their front office have always seen. And he's not shying away from being like, look, I know I'm a first-time manager. I know this is a question, but I'm ready. And to do that without any whiff of arrogance is quite a balance to strike, but it's authentic to who Mendoza is. Gary, I've known this guy for a couple of years now in his role over the Yankees. I obviously cover both teams. And that's who you get, a confident guy with presence and optimism who knows what he's talking about, is engaging and humble in the best ways.
By the way, we're heading back out Citi Field in just a moment because Steve Gelbs is going to be with Carlos Mendoza. He will join us in just a little bit here. I do want to follow up on what you talked about, what he talked about. And he was asked about a number of times was the fact that he is a first-time manager managing the New York Mets. And he pointed to the fact that, look, I've been in this town for 6 years. I've been the bench coach for the Yankees for the last 4 years, and he chuckled a little bit. He said, I understand that there are millions of fans out there who understand the game here in this town. And I thought that was important for him to acknowledge that, Andy, to understand the microscope and how much he is under the microscope at this point.
So I talked about the confidence not being arrogant, Gary. So I'd like to follow up because we drilled down on that a little bit more. He complimented the fans, the New York fans. He complimented the New York media. He complimented players. He went and said, like, all of these people are intelligent, parts of what I do and factors in his daily job. And he has respect for all of them. I've covered managers who very clearly believe, and I've covered GMs who very clearly believe that they know a lot more than you do. You don't have any business asking the question. And that's clearly not Mendoza, whether it's media, whether it's fans with their concerns and passions. He gets that. So that is something that he's picked up on already in the New York market. And by the way, Aaron Boone is his mentor in this. I've never seen a manager better at handling the New York media than Aaron Boone. He doesn't get nearly enough credit for that. He knows how to be self-assured but firm and confident, and that's what Mendoza's clearly learned at his side. So I wouldn't underestimate just the benefit that he's had of being at the right hand of someone who's already a master at this.
He also talked about the importance of that clubhouse culture, right? He talked about culture a number of times, the ability to relate to his players. And as we were sitting and watching, he's a bilingual manager. And I think that's important in the game. I think it's always been important in the game, but that ability, especially in this town with such a large Latin community, that is really important for him to be able to relate along those lines. I do want to go back out to Citi Field right now. That is where Steve Gelbs is standing by with the new manager of the New York Mets, Carlos Mendoza. Steve, take it away.
Gary, thanks so much. Carlos, congratulations once again. And, first off, I just want to start with the human element. You talked a lot about the human element. We saw how emotional you got. You told the great story about when you heard the news that you were going to be the Mets manager. How have those emotions hit you over the last couple of weeks as you've kind of let it sink in that this is a goal you finally accomplished? You're a big league manager.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, to be honest with you. We've been through a lot, especially the last week. And when I got the news, it was kind of like, all right, we celebrated a little bit, but then it was back to work. What's next? I got on the phone and started calling David and some of the people because we got a lot of work to do. But yeah, it was something that I sat back and for a couple of minutes and kind of realized that, this is a dream come true. It's something that I've worked all my life, and here I am, and I'm excited.
What is that process of getting to work when you get on the phone with David and you start thinking through all the things that you have to accomplish in this first off season? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, first thing was putting together a coaching staff. You start calling people and listening to recommendations and, going back and forth with David in the front office and, contacting people too, And then the most important is reaching out to players. Something that, like I said, the very next day I started reaching out to players and it's been great. I'm all about connection, relationships, because they got to get to know me. I'm not the only one trying to get to know them, but I got to earn their respect. And that's, the first thing that I got to do this off season is hopefully I'll get the opportunity to meet with them face to face, but I'm planning on just having at least a couple of conversations before we get to St. Lucie and get going.
Have you spoken to any of the players yet? And if so, any of the conversations stand out in particular?
Yeah, all of them. Lindor, the one with Pete Alonso, I felt like we were on the phone for like 45 minutes and felt like we could have kept going. Nemo, not too long ago, he was on a vacation trip, but sharp guys, smart, but at the end of the day, good human beings. I talked to Edwin Diaz. He was in Puerto Rico, and obviously can't wait to continue to have these conversations. And yeah, there's a lot more, a lot of texts. They don't know the number yet, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But like I said, I'm expecting to reach out and have these initial conversations here in the near future.
One of the first things you said in the press conference was that David Stearns and the front office put you to work during the interview process. Can you describe exactly what type of work, what type of conversations you guys had as you ultimately came together on this marriage.
Yeah, it wasn't easy, you know. Very thorough process, you know. A lot of Zoom calls that first round, you know. Meeting one-on-one. I remember one of the first day was 6 hours of just Zoom, you know. 1 hour with Davey, 1 hour with the next guy in, and you know, like it was one after another, you know, and I was just getting out of my office, quick break, and then back in again. Before you know, it was 3 o'clock, and then advancing to the second round, and I had to come here to New York and meet with a lot of different people, you know, groups of 4 or 5 from each department. It was an intense process, but the one that I enjoyed, you know, and then obviously meeting with Steve at the end was pretty good too.
Carlos, you've got a long day still ahead of you, so I'll just leave you with a couple of quick hits on the actual on-field product and your thoughts, philosophies as a manager. Number one, how do you view the DH role? Is your preference to have one solidified DH or to use that as a spot to rotate guys through and get them off their feet?
Well, ideally, you know, it's one of those that you could have that flexibility to rotate guys. But again, we're a long ways away to see what the team's going to look like. But you're asking me, versatility is important. I mean, not a secret that the way the game's going now, that, you know, the youth and the athleticism and keeping that spot is important. But I also understand we got, you know, people on our roster that we'll see what transpires here in the near future, you know. But I am excited with the roster, with the players, and I can't wait to get going.
What about from a rotation perspective? There's been a lot more of a movement towards maybe not just a strict 5-man rotation, mixing in that 6th guy. Do you like the traditional 5-man rotation, or are you open to more pushing towards a 6-man?
Well, I'm open for anything, you know, and I think a lot goes into making a decision like this, you know, like the flexibility on your bullpen, you know, how the bullpen is going to be constructed. You're going to have guys that are going to give you multiple innings, they're going to be able to give you pitches, you know, guys that are going to be able to go back to back. Those type of things come into play when you're making a decision, whether you're going to go traditional 5-man rotation or a 6-man. So there's a lot of conversations, and that's part of, you know, working together, right? Asking people's opinion and getting the players involved, because that's important too. Like, I'm a big believer that you have to empower players and making them be a part of the decision making too. At the end of the day, we will make that decision, but I always like to get that feedback from them.
Okay, and finally, when it comes to empowering players, one of the things that's going to be clear about this group this year is going to be an infusion of young players. Certainly some came up last season, but with the moves made at the deadline, there are guys that are right around the corner. How do you view bringing along young, talented players and giving them a level of responsibility when they're up here?
Yeah, I mean, starts with expectations from day one, right? But I think it starts with the leadership group that's already in place with the roster, right? Making that environment a welcome environment, you know, especially for some of these young players that are going to come up at some point. Some of them might be with us from out of spring training, but there's a lot of good players there. And what I'm going to do is just encouraging to spend time to get to know each other. You know, I want the Lindors, I want the Alonsos to spend time with the Acuñas and guys like that. And at the same time, I want those younger players to pick their brains, you know, and that's part of the process, the early process here in the off season. And once we get going in spring training, those relationships are already on the way.
Carlos, I know you've got, like I said, much more to do, so thank you so much for a few extra minutes. We'll see you soon.
Yeah,
all right, the new Mets manager, Carlos Mendoza. Guys, back to you.
All right, Steve, we thank you, and Carlos as well. By the way, Steve expected to be joined by David Stearns and also by Gary Cohen coming up in just a little bit. He talked about, Andy, right there, the fact that he's spoken with Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz and Brendan Nimmo, the core of this team and the relationships that he spoke about. He wants those guys to get to know some of the younger players and the infusion of youth. How important do you think that's going to be for Carlos Mendoza and the Mets as they move forward here?
Well, the point's well taken, because obviously baseball is best learned through passing down traditions and skills and having those kinds of conversations. So, I mean, it's not unique that a manager would want to foster that, but it's cool that it's top of mind for him on day one. And forming those relationships with the veterans is important for Mendoza, too. Terry Collins did a masterful job of this. When he got to the Mets, it was Beltran, Carlos Beltran, Johan Santana, David Wright, Jose Reyes, and he knew that he had to get the trust and form the relationships with those guys, and the rest of the clubhouse, the younger players, flow from there. Very much like Collins, Mendoza's a player development guy from that teaching world, so he has that skill himself, but he'll also meet those those veteran players and really form those bonds with them, and that's how a modern manager has to run a clubhouse in most cases. So he hit those points perfectly with Steve there.
I think it is. And by the way, we're going to be joined by Jerry Blevins and Todd Zeal coming up in just a little bit. I think it is interesting to hear him talk about the fact that he wants this clubhouse to be a close place. And that's important, I think, for a manager who's never managed in the big leagues before. And again, he spoke about that so many times. But when you've got veteran players like Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor, it's going to be really important for him to lean on those guys and to build that culture inside that clubhouse that's going to emanate out onto the field. And it does make a difference when you have that cohesion, Andy.
If you lose those guys, you have no shot. And so he knows, as I said, how important that is. Something one of his mentors in Boone did really well, forming that relationship with Aaron Judge and others. And Lindor in particular is someone who likes, I have observed that he likes the kind of coach or manager that Mendoza is. And that's a little bit of a hard-driving, tough, fiery guy. Lindor loved Buck Showalter for those reasons, loved Joey Cora, who's now departed to Detroit. So that edge that Mendoza can bring, that's likely to work for Lindor in building that relationship. It seems to be more than a lot of young players or younger players. Well, that's what Lindor seems to like.
In his opening statement, one of the things Carlos Mendoza said is he looks forward to building the relationship with Gary, Keith, and Ron. I thought was terrific. And what do you know? Gary is standing by with Steve right now. Let's go back out to the ballpark. Steve.
Yeah, Gary, he did. And this is the second straight press conference where Gary Cohen has been shouted out. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I'm standing next to a Hall of Famer right here.
Hi, Steve. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
Take a break from, your Sunday job.
Sure, yeah, me too. Gary, what did you make of the introductory press conference?
Well, he won the press conference. There's no question about that. I mean, you can understand what attracts people to Carlos Mendoza. He has an infectious personality, has a great positivity to him. He's obviously been working for this for a long time, and you can certainly get what he brings to the table. He's going to be an infectious personality in that clubhouse, and he knows the game. But he's never been a big league manager, and these are the questions that you ask going into any first-time stint. But I thought it was very interesting that when he was asked about managerial influences, the first guy he mentioned was Rob Thompson, who very famously stepped in as a first-year manager and turned his team completely around. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, and you heard from David Stearns, and it's right. Everybody was a first-time manager once, right? The good ones and the bad ones. So we'll have to wait and see. But to that point, and that has been such a point that's been driven home since the announcement of the hire, how do you generally view first-time managers, especially in New York, in this organization? An organization that, yeah, maybe will take a slight step back going into next season, but ultimately still wants to win and still wants to win very soon.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to take a step back from where they finished this year in terms of spending. I don't think we even know that yet. But that aside, I think that you never know until a guy gets to his first crisis, right? I mean, it's great that Carlos has coached in New York for the last half dozen years and that he's been next to the manager, but he hasn't been the manager. And going through the twice-a-day press conferences and being in charge of all the things that come through a manager's plate, I think that you're not tested until you're tested. And this is what we don't know. I mean, we went through this with Mickey Callaway, and that didn't work out so well. I think that, Luis Rojas got an incomplete because of the circumstances that he was presented with. But their experience was different, and Carlos is a different person. And I don't think you know until he takes over the job and has his first hiccup how he's going to handle that and deal with the cauldron that New York can be.
All right, finally, Gary, priority number one after hiring David Stearns was to hire a manager. Now, what in your mind is the next priority for this team this offseason?
Well, they obviously have to concentrate on their pitching. I mean, obviously Yamamoto's got to be their number one priority, and if they can get him, that will certainly be the start to a great offseason. But I think also with a first-year manager, who the bench coach is going to be very, very important. And I would assume that you're trying to find somebody who has managerial experience, who has been through the thought process that it takes to make decisions quickly in the moment. That's the kind of person I would think that David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza would be looking for.
Gary, great to see you, buddy.
Great to see you, Steve. That's a nice pin, by the way.
Yeah, I don't really know what it is. It came with the jacket, but it works. I don't think you're supposed to take it off.
Lovely, lovely jacket. You definitely have upgraded your wardrobe.
Yeah, well, it's fall. It's very fall. All right, he's Gary Cohen. I'm Steve Gelbs. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
I love the discussion right there, the sartorial splendor that they're discussing. We are going to hear from the president of baseball operations, David Stearns, coming up just a moment here. I do want to follow up on what they were speaking about, Steve and Gary, right there, as far as a bench coach. We heard, and you reported this a while back, that Jeremy Hefner is going to be back as the pitching coach this next season. They talked about that in the news conference. But as far as a bench coach goes, Gary spoke about the fact that, will they go for a guy who's got a prior managerial experience with a first-time manager here in New York? What's your take on that, Andy?
My take is that it's not 100% necessary. I've seen first-year managers, including Boone, that didn't have a bench coach with managerial experience. But my reporting, which is more important than my opinion, of course, is that he does want a bench coach with managerial experience. That's something that's important to Mendoza. That's a key relationship, obviously. Just those are two people that need to work particularly well together. Not sure how aligned Showalter and Eric Chavez were last year. The Mets probably need to upgrade that relationship. Whoever the two people turn out to be, it has to be a real close collaboration. I remember last year during games, we saw Hefner and Showalter side by side more often.
Quite a bit.
We saw Showalter and his bench coach. So ideally, Mendoza just has someone he can collaborate with and trust to run the kind of details that Mendoza now can't do because he's in that top job overseeing things. He does want initially a guy to talk to guys that have had managerial experience before.
All right, what do you say we go back out to Citi Field once again? Steve Gelbs rejoins us. He's with David Stearns. Steve.
All right, Gary, I promise this is the last time you're going to have to see me for a little while, okay? But I've got David Stearns with me. And David, I asked you this question, but just want to dig into it a little bit more. When you don't know a guy in advance, how does Carlos Mendoza first pop up on your radar? When did you first start thinking of him, at minimum, as a candidate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Carlos, because of his personality and he just goes about his job and does his work, maybe has been a little bit out of the public view for some time. But within baseball circles, within front offices, he's been talked about as a likely manager and a likely very good manager for a number of years now, going back 3 or 4 years. So he's someone that I've thought about for a while. And as soon as it became clear we were going to have an opening here, he was someone who was at the top of my mind as a potential candidate. And then the more I learned about him, the more I talked to players who have played for him, coaches who have coached with him, executives who have worked with him. The feedback I got aligned consistently with what I was seeking here. And then we progressed to the interview stages where I was able to spend some real time with him, understand how he thinks, what makes him tick. We got along great, and we're here today, and I'm thrilled about it.
He said in the press conference that you guys really put him to work, and he told us just now there was one day where he had 6 hours of Zooms with you and multiple members of the front office. What exactly were you looking for in those conversations? What did align with your own philosophy?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I wanted someone, and think it's essential to have someone who can relate to a wide variety of people. Managers are tasked, we talk so much about what they have to do in-game, but so much of their job starts at 2 p.m. and goes to 1 a.m. When the game's not actually going on. And they're managing personalities, and they're keeping groups of people from different backgrounds together, rowing in the same direction, people who are at different stages of their lives. And I think Carlos has all of these different world experiences, different life experiences, different perspectives that some of us don't have, but it allows him to relate to so many different people in a clubhouse, and that was very important to me.
At your introductory press conference, we talked about your history as a Mets fan and how you know the pressures of this city and this fan base are a little bit different. When you were looking at Carlos and talking to him, he seems to have such an optimistic, positive nature to him, and talks about that a lot and how important that is, culture building. How important was that to you to have somebody who had that type of attitude?
It is important because we know even the best of Major League seasons have their ups and downs. And so much of having a successful season is staying upbeat, staying positive, understanding that every 5-game losing streak or every tough loss or every tough injury doesn't need to upend your season. You just need to push through it and keep going and have faith that someone else is going to step up, that tomorrow will be better or next week will be better. And Carlos can do that. He's seen it all in this game. He's been through great years. He's been through tough years. And he brings with him that perspective and optimistic nature that I think is really important in a leader.
You talked about the fact that he's a first-time manager, but that everybody at one point was a first-time manager. With that specifically, though, what do you need to see when you're having these conversations that makes you believe that he's going to be one of the successsul first-time managers?
Yeah, there's a security that's probably needed, a self-security, a self-confidence, a belief in yourself that you can do this, and I think Carlos possesses that. And look, New York is different for everyone, and I do think that's important to note here. Whether you're a first-time manager, you're coming from a different market, New York is just different, and so you're never certain how anyone is going to handle the big stage and the bright lights. That's true with executives, it's true with managers, it's true with players. But I do think giving Carlos's experience in this town with everything that comes with it, I think he is uniquely positioned to handle this well.
Finally, David, you've been on the job now about a month and a half. As you've dug in and as you've started to formulate a plan for this offseason, what is the appetite right now of the organization to spend this offseason at the high end of the market the way that they have the last couple of off seasons?
I think this organization and Steve has indicated that when the time is right, the appetite is there. We're still evaluating what those opportunities could look like this offseason. And if we think now is the time, then we're certainly going to be competitive. But as I've said before, it's not going to be every premium free agent. It may not even be every offseason. But that doesn't mean we won't have productive off seasons. It doesn't mean we won't be able to put competitive teams on the field. We just need to evaluate what the right investments are at the right time for the organization.
All right, thanks, David. Congratulations on the hire. We'll see you in a few weeks in Nashville.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, guys. He's the president of baseball operations, David Stearns. Now send it back to you.
All right, Steve, we thank you, and David as well. We're joined right now by Todd Zeal and Jerry Blevins. They join myself and Andy Martino. So, guys, we've been listening to this for the last hour and 5 minutes or so, and I'll go to you on this, Todd. We've heard that word culture so many times discussed here, and David was speaking right there about being different. Things are a little bit different in New York. That goes for ownership, that goes for executives, that goes for managers, that goes for players. So along those lines, how important is it for Carlos Mendoza to build that culture right out of the gate with all of those things really encapsulated when it comes to being a winning franchise in New York?
Look, I think culture, I think the word culture is thrown around a lot. And I don't necessarily think there's one formula to create a culture. So is Carlos Mendoza going to be able to create a culture in New York in that clubhouse? Probably not. Is he going to have an influence on it? Absolutely. And I think the influence that he may or may not have is going to be the things that you already alluded to, Andy, in the confidence. And it was something that we, as a guy that didn't know a lot about Carlos Mendoza coming into this process, was told, hey, this guy is not a pushover. He was a bench coach, but he was kind of the bad cop. He's not afraid to go toe-to-toe with even veteran guys. He's not afraid to command his position. He runs a very tight ship. And all of those things kind of came through in honesty in this conference, in the presser, in the sense that he does have a quiet confidence about him. So I think that is something that can add to culture. But at the end of the day, culture oftentimes is reflective of the veterans that you have in the room and the way they present themselves, because you want them to present something that the younger guys coming in, and this team is going to have younger guys coming in, the way they present themselves is going to have an influence on the way those younger guys start to adapt to New York City and being a New York Met. And look, the reality is, 2 years ago, everybody said it was the greatest culture in the world. Last year, they said, oh, we're having fun, until they weren't. And then when they were bad, there was a lot of controversy around the culture. Tommy Pham said nobody worked hard enough. There was a little bit of dissension. And so you question whether or not, hey, does winning create culture? Does culture create winning? Sometimes that's a confusing aspect as well. And so I think he's got his work cut out for him. And I do think that his presence and that quiet confidence in his ability to communicate with players, it will be something that he uses to his advantage to create a culture that does find a way to permeate the entire team and be something that they can build on.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what Todd was saying. Is the word culture kind of is overused in a sense, but it's factual in the sense that you have to have something from the top. If you want to build a continual winner, you have to have a culture of success. And then it starts with attention to detail. He mentioned attention to detail a couple of times, and that means going about his business. And his confidence comes in the ability of him to understand what he does really well and to surround himself with people that can help him do those things that he doesn't do very well and make himself better. And that includes talking to players. I don't want to understate the fact that him being bilingual is a big deal. The ability to speak to some of your leaders on their own terms in Spanish in their native language, Lindor, Marte, Francisco Alvarez, you can go and talk to these guys and understand that relationship and build that. And also, he commanded himself very well in English. I think he blew me away with some of the way he spoke so fluently back and forth. Obviously, he's a very intelligent guy, but that's the key to culture. And it starts with this roster. There's a future being built, and he wants to be a part of it. But if he doesn't have success early on, that's going to be a moot point for him. But his ability to speak to those top players, the top talent that he has, and to hold them accountable for the future, that shows you the success that you can have immediately. And it'll be imperative for him to build that trust in those early relationships with the stars that he does have now.
I think you're right about the fact, Jerry, he needs to get off to a good start, right, with all the pressure he's going to be under as a first-time manager. But I do want to follow up here, Andy, on something he spoke about, and he specifically pointed to the room and said, I understand all of your jobs. I understand that you all have jobs to do and that you really understand the game. Speaking to the media, right, who are around him and cover him on a daily basis, what was the impact of that as you take a look at that?
Well, it was smart. Because the fact is, we in the media still do. As he described it perfectly. He's a bridge between the clubhouse and then we're the media, and then we obviously communicate to the fans of the team. And so the perception of how he is regarded in this market is influenced by his media coverage, of course. So what do? Number one, you get yourself into a mindset where you try to really authentically have that respect for media members and say, some of you guys know the game, and men and women, of course, shouldn't just say guys, know the game, understand the game, ask good questions. And the smart way to handle this is those of you who I don't respect, I'm going to treat you with respect anyway because of what that power dynamic is and the ability to influence perception. So there's two different sides of that, I think, is that I've interacted with Mendoza enough to know that he likes talking baseball with the media. He respects our job. He can come out from the dugout on a batting practice at Yankee Stadium. I'll say, how's Anthony Volpe developing as a shortstop? He'll tell me about his pre-pitch. He'll tell me about his throwing arm. He'll tell me about real technical things that are fun to talk about with baseball. But he also understands that you need to play nice with as many media members as you can because it's smart public strategy in a job that has a tremendous amount of scrutiny. So I saw both savvy and authenticity there, if that makes sense.
He also talked about the fact that his relationship with the players is so important so that they can trust him. And I do want to ask you, and I'll turn to you on this, Jerry, the empowerment of a manager when he gives that sort of a vote of confidence to a player and the understanding that a player is important in how a club runs. How important do you think empowerment, especially of key players, of your veteran players, is to a franchise?
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes to be able to have that respect. Yeah, Andy mentioned it as well. He comes off very respectful of people and their ability to do their jobs. And if they aren't doing their jobs, or at least putting in the effort that it takes to do their job successfully, he's not afraid to call it out But in a culture inside of a clubhouse, and for a 7-month-long season, you cannot micromanage every single player as the manager, and you're going to need to lean on some of those guys at the top of your roster to kind of say, hey man, I need you to turn it on a little bit. You're not doing what you need to do. Whether it's work in the cage or whether it's showing up or whether it's staying in at night. I'm not saying anybody in the past has done that, but if it does happen, you got to have the players be the first one to come and speak to you in the locker. And that's kind of something that's been lost in today's game, the ability for the player to hold other players accountable, because everybody just wants to show up and do their job. But I think Carlos Mendoza is looking to push that upon some of his players and not push them out of their comfort zone, but to make them aware that if you're a star, that's some of the things that you're going to have to do.
Yeah, Jerry, I think that there also can be a double-edged sword with that. I mean, you're thinking about the fact that he says he wants to empower players, but at the same time, he did go back to the fact that they know where the decision is going to be made. I talked to Joe Torre one time about his managerial philosophy. Obviously, a guy that I played for in a couple of different times and have great respect for as a manager, a successful manager. And his thought process really, when it comes to that point, is communicate with all the players. Let them know that they all have a voice and that they might have some influence, but you can never lose lose sight of the fact that the manager and the decision maker, what you say and what you do may have an impact. I'm going to take it all in, but there has to be one leader. And I think that was one thing that I really respected about Buck Showalter. Buck Showalter had that reputation because of his years in the game. And you think Buck Showalter is 25 years older than Carlos Mendoza. He's got that kind of experience where all of the guys said Buck was great to communicate with. We really had a great time talking to him, but nobody ever doubted who was making the decisions in that clubhouse and who the guy was that was leading that charge. And I think that's a fine line for a young manager, not to want to be too much of a friend to the guys, have his input, make sure that everybody feels heard. But at the end of the day, he's still got to be the guy that says, hey, the buck stops with me. The decision is mine, and I'll live with it. I'll be accountable for it. I'll take your advice, but the decision is mine.
I do want to follow up on that last question when Steve was speaking with David Stearns about what the Mets' plans are going to be this offseason. And David pointed to the fact that, listen, we're going to spend some years. We won't spend as much other years. And Andy, I want to turn to you on this because here's a Mets team with a veteran core, right? You've got guys in the prime of their careers in Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso. And there was this thought process that maybe this offseason won't be a big spending offseason because of what happened last year with the big salaries paid to those veteran pitchers. But in light of the fact that they have these veteran core players, do you not believe it's imperative that they do at least get into the game and spend the sort of money that will make them contenders this season? Because these guys are not going to be in their primes forever.
Gary, I think going back to Max Scherzer's comments about being told by the Mets brass that the Mets weren't going to be all in on free agency this year, there's probably been some lack of nuance in the general discussion of this. Say, are they spending or are they not? I know that's not how you asked it, but I'm referring to, is Steve Cohen in or is he not in? And that's really, I would scrap that way of thinking of it and think you hear clearly David Stearns trying to measure fan expectations. This is not going to be the Steve Cohen of the first couple of off seasons where he was willing to agree to a deal with Carlos Correa in excess of $300 million spontaneously. That's not going to be the kind of offseason it is, but that doesn't mean that the Mets are any kind of rebuilding either. Look, we're in an era where so many teams make the postseason that a Steve Cohen-funded and David Stearns-run Mets should be in the conversation for the playoffs every single year, and they expect that. So what we're really talking about here is, are you going to be involved in, are we going to be hearing rumors about Matt Chapman and Blake Snell and Shohei Ohtani? And the answer is maybe one of those guys, maybe a little bit, but the Mets aren't just going to be always trying that sign that star player. And by the way, that's what George Steinbrenner did in the 80s, and it never worked. So they're trying to dial it down a little bit with that approach and those expectations right now.
All right, so you mentioned the name Matt Chapman, and Jerry Blevins, you are a huge Matt Chapman fan. We've had so many conversations over the years about Matt Chapman. He's the best defensive third baseman, arguably in baseball. I know Nolan Arenado's in that discussion as well. But when it comes to the Mets this offseason, what do you think they should do? We know starting pitching is a priority, but what's your take on the offseason and what you think the Mets have to focus on here?
Yeah, they 100% need to focus on pitching, starting pitching, especially top end. Senga can't go in as the only guy at your A spot with Quintana behind him. You know, there's nuance there with Senga being in his second year, coming back off his first full season. There's a lot that goes into it. I don't think you want a contender for him to come out and be your ace. I'd love to see them supplement the front end. He might still be your ace, but it would be nice to get another front end starter. Then you need help in the back end, especially with Ottavino opting out and not being a guarantee back there. You're going to need back end help. Edwin Diaz coming off of that knee injury. And then you also need depth in the middle. So they've got to add to their pitching first and foremost. As far as Matt Chapman goes, I would love to see him don the blue and orange for sure, because I just love watching him play baseball. But I don't think it's a top priority. But they do need some type of a power bat, hopefully a left-handed bat, to protect Pete Alonso when he's batting cleanup.
Yeah, Jerry, I think, look, I've been saying all along, and the same thing that you just said. I think pitching has got to take priority. And I think top end guys in the rotation, I think Nola is a guy that they'll maybe be in on. I think Yamamoto is going to be somebody that they're all in on. But you always need depth in the pitching staff. And I think one of the ways that you can get a better staff is, to your point, bolstering that middle relief. You've got a guy at the end of the bullpen, Edwin Diaz, who for all intents and purposes is expected to be back healthy. He had the most amazing season for any closer of all time a couple of years ago, so you can't expect that, but you expect him to be good. So you've got to be able to bridge that gap. And the teams that seem to win and find ways to consistently get through rough patches during a season are the guys that can keep running power arms out of the bullpen. And in the big picture, you can bolster yourself with a lot of power arms for less on the salary drive side than you can going after big name free agents that might throw once every 5 days or could be susceptible to injury. So I think you load that, you load up with arms so you have a lot of choices, and you always know something's going to go wrong during the season from a pitching standpoint. And then I think the power bat and maybe a third baseman, I think those are secondary concerns. I think it all revolves around pitching, at least as top priorities.
All right, so certainly this can be a big discussion as we go forward here during the offseason, and that is going to wrap up for now our special coverage. And as Gary Cohen said a moment ago, when it comes to Carlos Mendoza, he won the press conference today. He was very impressive as Carlos Mendoza is announced and introduced as the 25th manager in the history of the New York Mets. Much more coming on this story. Coming up, Evan and Tiki at 4 o'clock, and then baseball night in New York at 6 o'clock. And then we're back on Mets Hot Stove tonight at 6:30. And so for Andy Martino and Todd Zeal, Jerry Blevin, Steve Gelbs, and all of us here at SNY, we thank you for watching. And again, we'll see you back on Hot Stove tonight at 6:30. So long.